Today I'm going to tie an ice cream cone Chironomid pupa. This is a fly that was originated by Kelly Davison many years ago, and it does a great job of imitating Chironomid pupa from real small ones to big bomber-sized chironomids. This fly uses a scud hook. You can also use a curved shank nymph hook and a white metal bead. You can also use a glass bead or a plastic bead. I'd prefer to use metal for the extra weight, so it'll pull it right down and keep the leader straight. I'm using 3/0 Monocord thread on this one. I like the Monocord because it lays nice and flat, and as it twists up you can untwist it and get it to lay flat again. So I just start the thread behind the bead, clip off the excess, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie in a piece of small UTC wire. And I really like the UTC because when you put super glue on it, it doesn't bleed any color. It maintains its nice vibrant color. On this particular fly I'm using red, but you can vary the colors to suit the naturals that you're trying to imitate. Red's a real good all-around color though for a chironomid rib. So I'm binding it in right down to the bend, just past the barb of the hook, and bring the thread back up to the bead. And then I'm going to use the thread to build up a little bit of a taper in the fly, because chironomids do taper from their tail up to the thorax. If the thread starts to twist up and add lumps, I'll just untwist it from time to time to keep it laying nice and flat. And as I'm wrapping, if I notice any lumps, I'll unwrap and then wrap again to keep it nice and smooth. I like my chironomids to have nice, smoothly tapered bodies with no obvious lumps or irregularities. I have a feeling that's good for the fish because they get a long time to look at it when that fly is suspended, almost motionless near the bottom. Body's going to be made from Krystal flash. You can use Flashabou as well, and again you can vary the color to match the naturals that you're going to try to imitate. I happen to have black Krystal flash, so this is what I'm going to use. Doubled it over the thread, 2 strands, and that ends up with 4, and then I'm going to bind it in just behind the bead. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it down to the bend where the wire ends and back up to the bead again. So I'll just wrap it down in slightly touching turns, a little bit overlapping maybe, and being very careful to avoid that hook point. Krystal flash and Flashabou are quite fragile, and if you catch the hook point on the way by, you're going to break your material, and it'll come springing down on you and drive you crazy. So I'm going to wrap it down to the bend, keeping it nice and thin, and then I'll turn around and come back up to the bead again. And I'm not worrying too much if it starts to open up a little bit, because since I've wrapped down to the bend and back up, the overlapping is going to cover any gaps that I might have. And since I use black thread as an underbody, it's not a really big issue on this fly. But if you have a different thread color, you're going to want to make sure you cover up the gaps. Once I get to the bead, I'll bind it down with a couple of turns of thread, and then I'll cut off the excess. I'm not going to worry too much about doubling it back and binding it down more securely, because I'm going to be coating this fly with super glue later. Take the UTC wire, take 2 or 3 turns right near the butt end to imitate a slight red butt. Sometimes Chironomid pupa have a pronounced red butt because of the residual hemoglobin. And then I'm going to wrap forward in open turns, trying to keep my turns nice and even, and maybe getting slightly bigger as I move up towards the thorax. Again, if I get one that's not quite right, I'll unwrap it and then I'll rewrap it again to get it just right. I think that since the fish have a long time to look at it, you might as well make the fly as perfect as you can. And insects are very symmetrical, and they don't have too many irregularities, so try to avoid the same thing in my fly. Bind the wire back so that it can't be torn off easily by a fish. Break it off with my thumbnail to avoid any sharp edges and not dull my scissors. And then build up a little thorax just up onto the bead with the thread. If you want, you can change the thread at this point and vary the thread color for your thorax. I'm going to do a whip finish right behind the bead. Again, trying to keep it nice and smooth. 1 turn right next to the previous one. Clip off the excess. Then I'm going to use some Loc-Tite brush-on super glue to coat the fly. If you didn't coat this fly, 2 or 3 fish and it would be torn to shreds, because Flashabou and Krystal flash not very durable. But put some super glue on it, let it dry, maybe even put 2 coats if you like, and you'll have a very tough fly you can catch dozens of fish on. as long as you don't get broken off. This is a really good all-around starting pattern, black with a red rib and various sizes. You know, if you're not sure what's hatching, this is a good one to use. Then to avoid gluing the fly to my fingers, I just poke it into a wine cork and then I'll just set it aside to dry. You can put all sorts of flies in one cork. And that's the ice cream cone chironomid, originated by Kelly Davison and tied by me.